Hey there, welcome back to the Badass Business Planning course. We're still here in Module 3 where we're talking about your niche. And in the last lesson, we talked about your customer segments and defining that. And we talked about how what you were doing at that point is trying to kind of like group people in to groups that have similar problems, similar needs, etc. And so if you did the work from the last lesson, you've kind of started the process of grouping people, but you're going to refine that over this lesson and the next lesson probably, where you're going to do some of this work to really refine it at a deeper level. So in this lesson, we're talking about identifying the problem or the problem sets that your audience has. So that's the goal here. And like I said, this is going to be done on a segment by segment basis. So if you do something where you, for example, create a 7 phases like we did. Now, you probably don't have 7 phases, whatever it is. But when we did our 7 phases, we looked at each phase and said, okay, what is the problem that they have at that phase? And part of what you're doing is trying to identify the different problems they need to solve. And so the work here is number one. First of all, you could think of your problem as what is the big problem? And this is probably where to start. Forget segments for a second. What is the big problem that your audience is trying to solve? So for the business stuff side of my business, it's they're trying to build a thriving online business that gives them the kind of flexibility and enjoyment they want in business, right? So that's the big problem. That's the ultimate result. But if I simply define the problem that way, it's not really that helpful because there are lots of sub-problems. And the magic is in identifying the sub-problems, in identifying what are the more granular problems that your audience needs to solve. And when you're identifying the problem here, you need to be thinking in 2 terms. Number one, what do they need? What is the real problem? What is the real thing they need to solve? But you also need to recognize what is it that they want or what is it that they think they need? And a lot of times there is a disconnect here. And so this is kind of what you have to do. But what I want you to get is oftentimes the disconnect is that your audience is what I would call symptom aware, not problem aware. For example, they recognize that something's not working, but they don't know the cause. Let me give you a very clear example in my space of building an online business. So some of the people who come into my world, they have tried launching an online course and had no success. And they think their problem is, I need help with reformulating and creating a launch. The problem is I launch and I don't make money, or that's what they think. But I'm here to tell you that's actually a symptom for most of them, because for most of those people, the problem is they don't have an audience. And if you don't have an audience, we have no idea whether the messaging or anything you did in your launch was right or wrong. And so the problem is they need to build their audience, right? And so that's kind of the problem. But they don't recognize that. To them, they said, I did the launch and nobody bought. Okay. And so you need to recognize those types of things. So you need to kind of identify what they view as the problem and what the real problem is. So that's part of the process here. But this is a very clear example, and I use that example intentionally because I want you to understand that I talked about that list building and building your audience because that's one particular problem at one particular phase. So for people who are building an online business, if they've already made a lot of progress, building their list probably isn't their problem. Now, they might have to tweak things, they might have to fix things, but that's not really their problem. And so I don't need to fix that for them. I don't need to help them fix that if there are people who already have, are making $500,000 in their business. Chances are, list building, they might need some maintenance, but they don't really need a solution to that problem from me. On the other hand, people who are just starting out, that is their big problem. So this is where kind of identifying those problems and the individual problems that your audience needs to solve is part of the process. Now, some of this will be that, there's multiple problems they need to solve at one time. Other times what you're going to find is that it's like one problem per segment. And that's kind of how you define it. But the goal here is to identify the problems that your audience needs your help to solve, and to do that on a segment by segment basis. And hopefully you're seeing where in some ways, if your segments in kind of the way you defined those segments wasn't perfect, but you took a first stab at it, when you go through the work of identifying all of the different problems that your audience has and that they need your help solving, you can start to say, maybe they're on a journey, and you can start to put those things in the right place, and that will help you to refine your segment. So if you struggled with defining your segments as the initial work, when you define the problems and as you work with your audience and kind of identify all of these different problems that they're having, what will happen is there's a good chance that you'll start to figure out, okay, here's what it is. There's this path they're on, and this group has this set of problems, and this group has this set of problems, and this group has this set of problems. So those are different segments. So that's what you're doing here, is you're identifying the problems, and this is a matter of start by identifying the big problem, then identify the sub-problems. And when you're talking about problems, I want you to be, number one, thinking about what is the real problem that needs to be solved, but also what are the symptoms that your audience might be feeling. And they might be talking about those symptoms, so you need to identify that, because when it's time to communicate with them, that's what you're going to do. So that's the work here, is to identify the problems on a segment by segment basis. So figure out the problems. Then in the next lesson, we're going to talk about identifying the primary needs. In other words, what kind of support does your audience need from you at these different segments? So that's what we'll be talking about in the next lesson. I will see you there.